Well. Bunch of pallets. I know exactly what I'm going to do with these. I'm going to deal with this horrible situation here. So, I mean, this is new. We just kind of started to peel some of the rocks and the landscape paper up here. But we have these horrible utility boxes in front of our house here that we want to block off just to kind of make it so that's not all you see when you look at our the side of our house here. So we're going to go ahead and build a flower box, which can technically be moved because you're not supposed to have immovable objects or build stuff right next to these. It's going to be it's going to be reasonably close to these. However, we'll be able to move them if people need to work on the boxes or anything like that. So it will still play within the rules, but help block these off so that this isn't all you see. So I want to build these using just half of each of these pallets. So we're going to run, so like this would be on the ground, and I'm going to cut it off right along here. It's using just over half the pallets. Now it's going to be 8 feet wide, so I'm going to be using, it's going to be 2 pallets wide. So I want to find 2 pallets, particularly for the front end, that you're going to see that look as similar as possible in the pattern, the spacing, and like the width of the wood. I'm actually considering these 2 pallets right here for the front. Now this one, as you can see, has some kind of, I don't know if that's like oil or some kind of burn marks on it or whatever. I'm going to take a sander to it right now and just see if I can sort of eliminate those enough that it will still look decent next to this one. All of these are going to get sanded right down and either stained or painted or something like that, just sort of depending on what we think once we get it put together. But I do want to try to eliminate some of that black stuff that's on here because it just looks gross. So just using my random orbital palm sander here, I gave this a whirl, and this is sanding with some 80 grit sandpaper. You can see these are like some burn marks. I don't know what the heck got splashed onto here that was on fire, but that's crazy. And so it's mainly on this top half here. This bottom half isn't nearly as bad. I think I'm going to wind up using that half, but this one board, you can see I gave it a bit of a sanding there. I think it's going to be good enough. So I'm going to pop that board off, or at least try to, without damaging it, and I'll wind up switching it, basically just flipping it, and then I can use the bottom half of that. So let's do that. So to remove this board, I'm going to use this crowbar here and just a hammer. I found in the past that this works really well to remove these, causing minimal damage. You're worried about accidentally splitting the wood where the nails are. Starting to feel like some hearing protection might be nice. Okay, so this is up and those nails are basically out. So now I'm going to really try to work on the middle. Okay, and I'm not too worried about this bottom part here because this is the side that was unfortunately split and necessitating moving this around. So I'm going to flip this like this and secure it on. Get rid of these nails first. Okay, so apparently I forgot to hit record on that last bit. What I've done is I've just spun it around and just using some new common nails, I just attached this here. I'm not bothering to put any nails on this side simply because this is going to be cut off and discarded anyway. All right, so you're going to want to cut in along this side of the 2x4 that's running through here. So this just takes a little careful placement of the blade when you start. Part of the problem is that the boards can spin like this a little bit and pinch the blade. Be a bit of an issue. There we go. Now I still have the boards that are on the underside here to deal with. I'm just going to flip this thing over here. Take a look at those. All right, so now for this part, I'm not going to need these on the back anyway, but I might wind up wanting to reuse these boards. So rather than cutting it off, I could just go rip right through here. I'm going to, once again, just use my crowbar and hammer and pry these off. Okay, so after cutting that first one, what I realized was that the 2x4 that was running across there was slightly off, and it actually runs from 21 inches to about 20 3/4, which for my purposes, because I'm doing this, it's going to be going in gravel, isn't going to be a big deal. I'm just going to actually assemble everything upside down so that the top side's completely flush. And then when I set it in there, it'll be totally fine. But that does mean for the rest of these that I am going to be measuring so that I don't make the same mistake again. And I'm going to do it at the lowest spot. So I'm going to go with 20 3/4. And I'm measuring over here as opposed to right on the end, just because this board here is a little bit uneven. And just for the heck of it, take a look here. This one I'm going to run at 20 3/4. I'm going to use my chalk line for this to create the line. Nice and easy. 20 and 3/4. Right there. Now, run this over here. It's pretty good. Beautiful. So I'll just get my saw and we can rip through this. Now I was going to have to run a line like this through here anyway, because this one has little 1x4s as opposed to a 2x4 running this way, and it's got some of those hard compacted wood blocks in there for spacing. So I think I'm just going to flip this over and take a look, see what I need to do. All right, so this is just going to be measuring and cutting again. Okay, and hopefully this cuts through most of that block. Oh, we were just a little bit shy on these. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have to, oh, that can't, at least that comes off nicely. So now, I've got these here. I think I'm just going to grab the Sawzall and slice through there. All right, you know what? My handsaw here is a lot easier to get to than my Sawzall right now. So I'm going to just see how hard it is to slice through this with the handsaw first. Oh. Yeah, it's going to be a hassle. You know what? Let's get the power tool. Actually, I think what's going to be easiest is if I flip it. Kind of support it with my foot. And let's see how this works. Did you get in here now? You need a slightly longer blade. See, I told you. Anyway, let's try it out. All right, there we go. So that is cut off nice and flat. Beautiful. On to the next step. Okay, so now I'm going to repeat those exact same steps with 2 more pallets just to get the back side of the flower box. Okay, so with these front and back walls that I've got here, I am going to want to remove the bottom part of the pallet as well as this interior part here. In this case, it's sort of these like 4x4 blocks, and then it's some 2x4s and other pieces, but I want to get rid of them. And I was just going to go ahead and pry them off like you've seen me do with my pry bar. However, as I was doing this, a viewer commented on my pallet playhouse video and suggested using a Sawzall. So just going ahead, loosening this board a little bit, then using a Sawzall to cut the nails, which is brilliant, really brilliant. Thank you, Rory. I'm going to give that a whirl right now. So here we are. Now, in order to loosen this, because I do want to keep this 1x4 on here that's holding all these together so that there's some stability, but I'm just going to use this chisel. This is just like an old, really beat up chisel that I don't use for cutting stuff, but rather for kind of just using like a wedge like this. There we go. Okay, separated that. Got my Sawzall, and now I've gone ahead and put in a rather monstrous metal blade here. Just gonna run this through. That could not have been easier. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the backs of all of these here, and yeah. I don't have a Sawzall up at the shack, which is where I do almost all of my pallet projects, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to take one up next time I go. So yeah, sweet. And there we are. So another thing I'm going to do here, just because there's no point in having the tops be so deep, because that really will either then cut into the amount of space that I'm going to have for the flower box, or it's going to just expand the overall size. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to mark off 1 inches off here, so that I'm going to trim this board so it's only 1 inch wide instead of being the 3.5 there. Since it's a 2x4, so my chunk line again, just like so. Then we'll glove up and get the old skill saw out here for this. And I'm going to balance out on my leg so I can grab my stuff. And again, just measuring out from the inside edge of that board, 1 inch. And the same on the other end. This cut will be a little bit trickier just because it doesn't want to balance as easily. However, pretty sure I'll be able to make this work. Alrighty, and side number 2. Alright, so there's a slight change of plans here. Originally this pallet here I was going to use for the 2 side pieces. However, I decided to change my mind because it looks a lot nicer than the one that was going to go for the front. So this is going to be the second piece for the front, and this one here is going to be used for the 2 side pieces. So I'm going to measure just from each side in and then make a cut coming in, and I'm going to go with 21 inches just because that's going to land me kind of right in the give me a little bit of decent meat, if you will, in some of these pallets, like as I fumble with my, see, so go 21 inches here, and it's nicely in the middle of that board, and 21 here, nicely in the middle of that board. which will make it so it looks half decent rather than just having it. Originally I was going to go 20 inches, but then it would have been pretty skinny with that one piece. And 22 is going to land me right in the middle of some of those screws. So 21 it is. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing, mark them, chalk line, and then blast them with the skill saw. Okay, so we are down to the biggest hassle of the job, part one, which is to get these, the exterior of this all looking beautiful, sanded, cleaned up. As part of that, and this is part of what makes this a big hassle, I need to make sure that all of these nails are down. I'm going to use that random orbital palm sander to do this. I'm just going to go ahead and use this punch to hopefully get some of these nails that might be sticking up a little bit back down into the wood so I don't shred my sanding discs and just spend a lot of money on nothing. There we go. Okay, now I grab the sander and a mask, and it's time for that. All right, well, you get the idea. I'm going to carry on with this, and once I have the main part sanded here, I'm going to work with it a little bit more. One other tool I'm finding handy is this little mouse sander here that I'm able to use to try to get into some of these little nooks and crannies. It's a little bit harder on these ones with the slightly narrower space, but on especially the first two that I did that had a wider gap here, it was super fast just to get in there and then also do a quick little sand on those inside edges of those 1x4s. Now I just need to do the same process here with these two side pieces. Okay, so the next step is I need to cut some strips that will cover these gaps in this pallet walls from the inside. So I'm just going to go to all of my, I'll call these off-cut pieces here, and find ones that are wide enough to overlap enough that I can screw them in, and then I just have to sand them. Just on the outside portion that would be seen. And I've got a child here. Just going to measure here. This is going to be right around 13 and 5/16 or so. Now because these gaps here are pretty narrow, I can use some of these pieces that are even split a little bit or about half width. So I'm going to use this here. For some of the other ones, the gaps are more like 3 inches, so I need to use a full 4-inch piece. But not on this one. It's a great way to use up some of this wood that I wouldn't really have a use for otherwise. Actually, first I just need to double check and make sure that this is square, which it's not. And then 13, 15/16. We'll just rip this off here. Actually, that was foolish. I gotta go from the flat side here. There we are. And perfect. So I'm going to get the rest of these cut up and then I will sand. I'm doing it one board at a time here. Alright, now I just got to repeat this a whole bunch of times. Okay, so now that I've got all of these pieces sanded and ready to go, this one's kind of a wonky shape, but it actually matches perfectly with what I have here. I'm working from what's going to be the inside of the flower box, and I'm just going to place, of course, the sanded pieces down because that's going to be on the inside. And now what I'm doing is I'm kind of matching up, going even on either side, starting at the bottom and then just looking for the top, trying to get it as even as possible. I'm not bothering to measure at this point. That's not a huge deal, as long as I've got enough that I can bite. Now, because these aren't a whole lot wider than the actual slots, I'm going to be pre-drilling, and I'm going to be using these. I think these are 1-inch the deck screws. These are the green ones for pressure treated, whatever. Got a ton of them, so I'm going to use those. I know that they're not going to get messed up or anything right away. Now I'm using a 5/32 drill bit here to pre-drill, just so I don't, to minimize splitting of this wood as much as possible. 3 30 seconds, not 5. I was reading the number upside down. And like I was going to say, I'm actually going on an angle here. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going, this is sort of an exaggeration of the angle, but I'm going a little bit like that, just so I can bite into as much of these exterior planks as possible. And then I'm actually using 2 drills. I hate pre-drilling holes, especially with this because there are a ton of holes. There's 4 screws per, and I've got a lot of planks to put on here, and I don't want to be constantly switching out my bits. So fortunately, I've got 2 drills, and I can just make relatively short work of this, just bouncing back and forth like so, and drilling them in. The other part of the other reason for going on a slight angle is these screws are longer than, or sorry, are shorter than the distance, the thickness of these two, but not by a whole much, and I don't want to risk accidentally driving in a little too vigorously and having it poke out. So I'm just going to go ahead and screw all of these on here. All right, couple of quick tips I found from doing this. First of all, the pilot holes work super sweet. I also took my drill bit and I put it down far enough inside the drill here that there was no way, even if I go right to the edge here, I'm not puncturing and coming out on the outside. So that's tip 1. The 2 drill thing is really sweet. Going on an angle, I found, resulted in fewer splits, I think, than would have happened otherwise, especially with some of this older wood. And yeah. See, perfect. I didn't screw any of those up, and we are left with this. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish off all the rest of them here. All right, so now it's time to assemble. Now, because I want, because the base of this is going to be on gravel, which is relatively uneven anyway and is easy to kind of manipulate, I'm flipping this upside down to assemble so that the top is completely flush. Just because these are pallets, there might be some slight unevenness to it, to say the least. So I've already flipped this upside down. This is one of my front walls and one of the side walls here. And I'm just going to assemble it using some 3-inch, some of these green 3-inch screws here. So I'm just going to make sure that, first of all, it's flat on the bottom. I'm just going to use this, do a couple of screws. I'm going to run through here and then just into the wood that's behind on the side wall, on the front wall there. Just like this. There's one, here's the other. Okay, so, and I mean, that's good enough for now. This is going to be held together by some other stuff on the inside, but these 2 screws for now will hold it together good enough to at least get it assembled. So part of any job is making sure that you know what the heck you're doing, and I accidentally went ahead and I screwed this in this way. I actually want this wall on the outside, so I'm just going to undo that and redo it. Whoops. Alright, so now I just need to line these things up and basically assemble, connect these 2 main parts of the box. So, I now have this box pretty much how I want it. I had to trim off a little bit of this pallet here. as this was actually a few inches longer than the what's going to be the front end. But now I want to put the base of this on. So I'm actually working, this is bottom side up here, working from here. I'm just going to cut 24-inch or 2 feet long planks off of these other pallets and just run them right across just to create a base to contain dirt and what have you. So I'm just going to do that same trick, popping up these planks here with the chisel, and then using the Sawzall just to slice through the nails, and then I'm going to get them onto here. All right, so it's time to assemble all these. I didn't bother sanding them or anything because of course they're simply going on the underside, so I'm not concerned about them being sanded or anything like that. They're simply here to just to hold the dirt in a little bit so it doesn't all just leak out, and so that if I have to shove this thing around a little bit, I can do so without messing up the dirt. So I'm just going to go ahead and attach them just like I did the inside slats here, just with some pilot holes and the same sort of screws just into the frame here, and that will not only prevent the dirt from coming out, but it'll help stabilize these walls as well. So it'll help everything just be a little bit stronger. All right, so we got all of these on here, and it is time to flip it over, and hopefully it holds together okay. So there's nothing connecting the middle here at the top yet. The bottom seems to be fairly stable. Yes, I'm doing this all by myself, believe it or not. All right, there we are. Okay, perfect. All right, on to the next step. So to help beef up the strength here on the seam, I'm just going to take one of these little offcuts like this. I'm going to cut it to length and then run it across and screw it through into both sides. So now I was originally thinking of placing some strips here on the outside in order to plug up those gaps, but I'm actually going to go from the inside. And as you can see here, I've just cut some pieces that will fit right in there. I'm going to screw through this direction and then from the outside into here. And I'm going to do this using the same method as I used before, with drilling some pilot holes and then the screws just to prevent this wood from splitting. So now for what should be the last part of the actual construction here is I'm just going to take some narrower strips of wood off a couple of pallets and run them just across the top here, just as like a top cap to finish that off nicer. All right, so for those top caps, I've just cut some of this wood off of a pallet here, and I'm going to rip it through the table saw. It's funny because on this pallet, like every one of these boards on one side was a little bit mucked up, but the other side was pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead, fire these through here, and then give them a nice sanding, and then they'll be cut to length and put on. So now that I have all of these little strips nicely cut, I made the decision that I'm going to wind up positioning well, it's not quite 4 feet long, these strips, but positioning one in the middle on the front and the back side, and then that way it's going to go, I won't wind up with like two, seams, if you will, kind of near the middle, and then cut a couple of shorter pieces here on the front and the back just to match up to these side pieces. I'm also running these side pieces right from the front to the back, because then they can overlap and add just a little bit further strength to this. So I just need to measure this distance here, and then position this other piece up here, measure this distance here, cut those two pieces and out of these other boards here, get everything all really aligned before I start to screw any of them in. Pretty good. I do have a little bit of a bump up here where this wood's cut a little bit higher for some reason, so I'm just going to go ahead and file that off. Okay, that's quite a bit better. All right, I'm just going to repeat with the other side. And of course, the really nerve-wracking part, going ahead and screwing all of these on. Got them all lined up, everything looks pretty good. So hopefully I can do this all right. I believe I'm going to start with this board here and work my way around this front first. All right, well, it is time to prep this up with some stain, just to help protect the wood against the elements and all that kind of fun stuff. I've got it up on some pallets here, actually pretty close to where it's going to wind up, going. Now, what I'm going to be using here, this is a Bear product. It's a semi-transparent, weatherproofing, all-in-one wood stain and sealer. The particular color I'm using is light lead because we wanted something that had a bit of a grayish tinge because we're going with some dark gray rocks and stuff in here. So hopefully it looks good. We're going to give it a whirl anyway. I'm going to try to apply it relatively thick. I imagine we might be putting on more than one coat. We'll see how this turns out here. Well, here we are after staining. I wound up giving this 3 coats, and that really kind of gave us this the gray color that we were looking for that's going to match the rock that we're putting down, but you can still kind of see the grain and stuff and tell that it's you know, real pallet wood and what have you. So now we just have to get this thing placed and get the rocks down and get some plants in there. And here is the finished product. We got some rock in here that we really liked better than the original rock that we've got. Actually kind of matches with the gray going on here for the planter box, and got a bunch of plants picked up and put in here the other day. So I think we just need a little bit more soil. It's a little bit lower than we need, but we'll get that taken care of today. So anyway, yeah, extremely happy with how this planter box turned out. It's really durable and is hopefully going to last quite a long time, especially with that stain on there, just to help protect the wood. But yeah, extremely happy, and I would say that this is probably taking upcycling to 11.